Tell us about Education for All.
So Education for All is a commitment that was made actually back in 1990. And the idea behind Education for All was that every child had the right to a free, quality primary education. Unfortunately, that promise has yet to be met. So Educate a Child started in 2012 here in Doha. It is a part, one of the programs of the Education Above All Foundation. And our mandate is to actually find and provide a primary education to out-of-school children at the primary level, wherever they are.
You spoke earlier in one of your sessions about setting audacious goals for education. Why is there a focus on that? What's meant by that exactly?
Well, I think the initial idea behind that actually came from Her Highness Sheikh Hamoza. And when she started Educate a Child, she gave us a goal of finding and enrolling 10 million children. That's pretty brave. It's pretty big. It's audacious. And basically, we had the freedom to find a way to do that. We achieved it. We've actually exceeded it. We're at over 14 million now.
Wow.
So in reflection, it was, okay, what is it that makes you want to have an audacious goal? And I think to begin with, when you think about it, the problems we face are so large. We have yet to achieve that 1990 commitment of education for all. If we do it in tiny little incremental ways, we're never going to get there. So you do need big goals. You need brave goals. You need goals that put things really at scale. It's really easy to say that.
Yeah.
It's not simple to get there. So I think part of what we wanted to do today was to bring to this forum some of the people that who've been engaged with audacious goals and who've actually been able to move the needle in terms of getting towards their target, whatever that target was. Of course, for all of us here at that session, we're all concerned about education. But I think the idea of setting an audacious goal and what are the principles underneath that to make it achievable probably are not just limited to education.
Of course. Now, when we talk about audacious goals, what about the action towards those goals? Does that need to be equally audacious,
Well, that was actually a key part of the session. So the session looked at, okay, what are audacious goals? And then we looked at what's sort of some of the difference between influence and impact. Because what you want with an audacious goal is to have impact on the ground. How do you get there? How do you make that big idea that's sort of, yes, we want to get millions and millions of children back into school, how do you actually make that work in countries like Nigeria, like Pakistan, like Haiti, very, very different kinds of countries? How do you make that happen? What does it take? And really one of the questions we were talking about and thinking through was essentially one of the things we've learned is that partnership is critical. You can never do a big goal on your own. It takes a lot of people, a lot of energy, sometimes a lot of organizations, and usually quite a bit of money. So what are the kinds of partnerships that you need to put together to make that work so you can actually make some progress towards getting to that goal?
Let's stay with that topic of partnerships. What do those partnerships look like? Who are they involved? It's a combination of private and public sector. What does that look like? Why are they so important?
So for Educate a Child, our partnerships are really varied. They begin first and foremost with the partners on the ground who are going to find and enroll those kids. So for us, those partners could be international organizations, they could be multilateral organizations. So an international organization might be somebody like Save the Children or CARE. A multilateral organization, somebody like UNESCO or UNICEF or UNHCR. Or they could be local NGOs, and we've worked with all of those kinds of organizations. So those are the partnerships on the ground that make it work. Then you also need to have your partners who are more your global advocacy partners, the people who help you bring global attention to that particular issue. So in that regard, you might choose the Global Partnership for Education, UNICEF, you have spokespeople, certainly we have Her Highness Sheikh Moza. So those are the kinds of pieces that come together, but then you have to worry about the funding piece. How do you pull those partnerships together? So in what we have been doing over the years is really trying to experiment with different ways of pulling in different kinds of partners so we have more people caring about the same topic and bringing additional money to the table. So we started first with working with the Islamic Development Bank. We set up a fairly large partnership with them. We now have partnerships with the Asian Bank, the World Bank, and the Inter-American Development Bank.
Excellent. So plenty already done, but plenty more to be done as well. And I want to go back to something you spoke about earlier about impact and influence. What is the difference in terms of educational development between impact and influence, and how do you measure them?
I think impact is probably easier to measure than influence, although they are really tightly linked. So how do we measure impact? For us, we measure impact by the number of children we are able to reach. And unusually, we require our partners to count every child because we believe if you don't count a child, the child doesn't count.
Yeah.
So we actually make our partners, we insist that our partners identify and count the children and follow them as they progress through their education. So I mean, that's a way of looking at that's certainly a way of looking at impact. There are other ways we can measure it, where we've had an influence on national policy, where we've had an influence on perhaps an international agenda. So the influence part, I think, is much harder to measure. How have we measured it? We've measured it certainly by the way we've been able to broaden our partnerships. We look at how the conversation has changed around out-of-school children since we started working, because there are more people talking about it, more people understanding that it's not the kids that are the problem, it's the barriers that are in the way of them getting into school. So kind of being able to see people turn their conversation around, change the narrative around what it is that keeps these children out of school, what is it that prevents them. It's not the kids' fault. So I think those are some of the ways you can measure influence. You can also measure influence by just by the partners you have, the nature of the partnerships, the reputation of your partners.
And I want to close by talking about a significant development in this area, which was the announcement in Afghanistan that Taliban would be reneging on its decision to allow girls to access education. What are your reflections on that initially?
Well, my initial reflection was just enormous sadness. Certainly a real concern. This is a violation of a human right. Every child has the right to access a quality education. So this is certainly just first and foremost a violation of that right. I think also it's important to understand what a critical time in these girls' lives this is. This is not for every girl in Afghanistan. This is for girls who've already completed their primary education, seen a way forward, had their eyes opened. There are girls who are aspiring to something else, and the door has just been closed shut. So I think that's a very difficult situation. I think we're all disappointed because we had been told it wouldn't be this way. So the point of the fact is now it comes up to those that can influence to begin to try to influence, to try to make a difference, so that we can actually make it possible for those girls to get back in school soon. Because we know from the COVID crisis that when kids are out of school, there's learning loss. And it's just happening to them all over again.